all starts with this, a jewel containing the ultimate power.
You might look like me, but I know you're just a fake.
I see, but you know, I can't let you live. My name is Shadow.
Shadow, I'm so sorry.
Maria!
Shadow the Hedgehog. Where to begin? This character has been through a lot, and I mean that both in terms of in-universe events, but also in his public perception. I always intended to cover Shadow when I started the Where Sonic Went Wrong series, but admittedly, the challenge of tackling Shadow has been rather daunting. The reason for this is that, in my opinion, I truly believe Shadow has been the character most thoroughly ruined by Sega and the recent era of Sonic. Let's get the elephant out of the room first. You can't discuss the character of Shadow without addressing his edgelord status. I'm not going as far as to say that everyone who considers him edgy does so without understanding the character, as people definitely still thought he was edgy when he debuted, but now it's apparently all the character is. Whilst I was gathering notes for this video, I was surprised to see people commenting on the theme of Radical Highway and calling it edgy. Clearly, this has gotten out of hand. Modern day Shadow is a joke. Overly edgy, incredibly selfish, hates Sonic, hates just about everyone, hot-headed. This is all completely wrong and spits in the face of his past characterization. There has been a rise in people countering the edgy narrative around Shadow on YouTube, as many will naturally see the rampant misconceptions. Whilst for the most part I think that's great, some of these videos put up different interpretations of Shadow that, whilst I prefer them over the edgelord, still misrepresent the character in my opinion. My goal with this video is to try and articulate why Shadow was a character many people enjoyed. Naturally, people would have enjoyed or not enjoyed the character for different reasons, but hopefully I can at least convince you of a trend in the way that he was written before the more recent years, and why many of us believe this was better. For those of you who want an edgelord, rejoice! The Sonic universe has one for you.
You may call me Infinite.
That's what it takes to be infinite! So look around you and tell me what you really see. I never been, and that's the difference.
Without further ado, let's begin. Shadow is introduced as an antagonist during the events of Sonic Adventure 2. Although he would later have a change of heart, Shadow eagerly engages with the story's events of the Dark Path. It is important that we understand why he behaves as he does if we wish to define his character. As far as he is aware, Maria Robotnik's dying wish was for Shadow to enact vengeance upon the human race dwelling on Earth, all who deserve this punishment, and that Professor Gerald gave him the order to carry this mission out. Maria was Shadow's only friend, and Gerald his creator, so they were the only people who mattered to Shadow before SA2. Even with this as a motivation, his lack of remorse for his enemies may be considered strange, since he does have it in him to change sides later on. During the schemes of his campaign, it's not odd to see him smirking, seemingly relishing in sowing the seeds of destruction. This brings us to a concept that I believe is core to Shadow's personality and dictates his every action: his unwavering resolve. By this I mean two things. One is his belief in who he is and what he stands for. The other is having a goal to contextualize his actions against who he is, resulting in him fully believing in everything he does. This is how he achieves his unwavering resolve, and the state of it during a given situation will affect how Shadow acts. Since he believes to remember the events of the past as clear as day, on top of discovering Professor Gerald was in fact executed, Shadow has no reason to doubt the purpose he believes he has, at least not at first. Running alongside his perceived purpose is his position as the ultimate life form, and I don't mean that in just a literal sense of being created as one. Shadow clearly features a superiority complex in Sonic Adventure 2. This can be seen by how he interacts with others. Now, with Eggman, he is clearly manipulating him, but he understandably talks down to humanity. In addition to heavily disrespecting Sonic, who to Shadow would be considered an insulting copy. Parts of this mentality even spill out when he confronts Rouge later in the game, as he calls her a pathetic creature.
Looks like things aren't quite going your way, but since my job was done, I thought it was time to take what's mine and get out of this place.
You are one pathetic creature.
Speaking of his interactions with Rouge, they do play a part in Shadow's eventual change of heart. When Rouge exposes the reality behind Project Shadow and the bio-lizard to him, Shadow seems to be trying his best to reject that information and reaffirm to himself of who he is. You can really hear this struggle in the delivery of the line.
Even if my memories are not real, it's still me, Shadow, and I will fulfill my promise to Maria. That's the only thing that matters to me now.
This is both an example of his unwavering personality, sticking to who he thinks he is, whilst at the same time showing that perhaps he is not as certain as he wants to be. Rouge also has a similar effect when her distress call on Prison Island prompts Shadow to double back and save her. Now, Shadow justifies it was for the Chaos Emeralds, so as to protect his sense of self, so this event doesn't have much of an effect on its own. Even Sonic's actions slowly shake the foundations of Shadow's purpose. If he loses to Sonic during their first encounter, he does acknowledge the accomplishment, even if it is delivered as an insult. When Sonic is presumed dead, Shadow seems comforted as he waves off the only person that made him question if he really was so above the rest after all.
I guess he was just a regular hedgehog after all.
This makes Sonic's surprise return all the more impactful for Shadow, who tries to eliminate Sonic once and for all. Something all of these events had in common was that they were seemingly bringing out Shadow's true memories by encouraging him to question what he was doing. Whilst his unwavering resolve is core to his character, the SA2 Shadow has had his memories tampered with, which affects the equation slightly. I can't be certain, but it seems fair to say that Shadow from 50 years ago was perhaps a nice person, or at least not evil. As such, his subconscious probably knew something wasn't quite right, but from Shadow's perspective, this was the truth, so no matter how many of these little events happened, he wouldn't change his mind.
His love is plan. I promise you. Revenge!
Of course, Shadow does change his mind, but this is thanks to his conversation with Amy Rose. Through her words, Shadow is convinced, or rather more accurately, reminded that humanity is not all bad, as well as allowing him to finally remember Maria's true wish.
Shadow, I beg of you, please, do it for me.
Maria!
For the future, for all people who live on that planet, give them a chance to be happy. Let them live for their dreams. Shadow, I know you can do it. That's the reason why you were brought into this world. Sayonara, Shadow the
I
Hedgehog.
promised her. I must keep that promise.
His reaction to all of this shows just how important his beliefs and identity matter to him. Everything he had done during the game was suddenly retextualized. He was wrong, and the weight of this realization brings a tear to his eye. In that moment, Shadow immediately jumps to action and aids the team in order to fulfill his true promise, which leads to a great appearance that coincides with a brief remix from Sonic Adventure 1.
Leave this one to me.
Shadow, what are you doing?
I'll take care of this while you run to get the Chaos Emerald!
Speaking of music, in the fight against the Bio-Lizard, one of the phrases is This again ties into how Shadow strives to do what he believes in, and to believe in himself. For the final fight, Shadow is fully committed to saving Earth. There is a line Shadow speaks to Sonic that recently has gained a lot of attention, where he suggests perhaps Sonic is the ultimate life form.
Sonic, I think I've discovered what the ultimate life form is. It might be you.
This has given way to a slew of fan theories on the topic, as well as some believing Shadow is some frail experiment due to how the Japanese dialogue mentions he's struggling to maintain his super form. For the latter, Shadow is wearing inhibitor rings and Sonic is not. The purpose is that of their name. They restrict Shadow's power. Considering he's been in status for 50 years, Shadow would vastly overpower Sonic if he could match him in every category under these conditions. It doesn't make him weak just because the super form, that he has never used before by the way, is taking a lot out of him. As for the ultimate life form statement, I believe this has been misinterpreted. After the revelation Shadow had with Amy, it would have caused Shadow to re-evaluate moments in the game that caused him to hesitate, such as Sonic using Chaos Control with a fake emerald. I think what Shadow meant was that if the ultimate life form was like a title which could be earned, Sonic would be the most deserving of that role. I do not think he meant Sonic was an actual ultimate life form, considering clear differences such as one of them aging whilst the other does not. Regardless, in the end Shadow gives his life to protect the planet, doing so comfortably with the belief that this was what his friend wanted all along.
Maria, this is what you wanted, right? This is my promise I made to you.
Shadow's death is obviously a huge part of his character. In the scope of Adventure 2, Shadow had gone from heralding the destruction of the Earth to giving his life to save it. At the start of the journey he was fully convinced that ending humanity was what he had to do, whilst by the end he fully believed his purpose was to protect the world. During all of that, Shadow thought he was being true to who he was. At the start he thought he did not care about anyone new, but by the end he accepted that he did. The next time we see Shadow is during Sonic Heroes. His discovery was a surprise for Rouge, who rightfully had believed him dead. As it was originally intended, Shadow would have remained dead, but his popularity caused the Sonic developers to bring him back. How would they tackle his character after a fulfilling conclusion? Amnesia. Whilst it is an overused trope, it doesn't inherently have to result in something bad. Since this Shadow barely remembers anything of the past, it will be interesting to see how he reacts to the events around him. Immediately upon waking up, Shadow takes note of E123 Omega and seemingly instinctively protects Rouge from his surprise attack. Shadow has no idea who this woman is, but chose to save her before attacking Omega anyway. You could say he subconsciously remembers Rouge, but they weren't exactly the best of friends in SA2. I think it's much more likely that Shadow is just the type of guy who would save someone, hence why he does so. After Rouge calms down the situation, Team Dark is formed. United currently only under their vague goal of finding Eggman. You could hardly call this a merry band of friends. Their strong personalities lead to a bunch of posturing and taunting as they test one another's limits. As the game progresses, the three slowly grow to respect each other's abilities, and eventually could be called friends. Interestingly, Rouge never seems to explain all of Shadow's past to him, which will affect some of his decisions in a later game. Through his voice lines, we can see that Shadow still takes pride in being the ultimate life form.
This is the ultimate power!
Clearly clinging to it as one of the few things he can identify as to what makes him Shadow, due to a lack of memories. On the same note, Shadow seems to have a bit of a cocky attitude whenever he's conversing with someone, seen to its fullest when confronting Team Sonic, which plays a lot like their SA2 jungle encounter. When interacting with Dr. Eggman, we see Shadow is a little vulnerable, knowing he's at the whim of Eggman deciding to tell him his past, or not. You know, Rouge, it would be really convenient if you told Shadow these answers so that he doesn't make any bad decisions down the line. Something worth pointing out about Shadow's general behaviour in Heroes is whilst he can be boastful and cocky, there seems to be a noticeable lack of his superiority complex he had in SA2. This can likely be attributed to the fact that he doesn't have an internalised mission to exterminate an entire species, which, as I mentioned before, makes this an interesting comparison to his previous appearance. By the end of Team Dark's campaign, Shadow appears to be content with the adventure he's had, although it looks as if the members of Team Dark would soon split off to go their own ways. Technically, the final story has himself and Omega take custody of Metal Sonic, but this plot thread is dropped, so I assume he splits off like the team ending suggests. Sonic Battle theoretically would be the next appearance for Shadow, and it provides some really interesting insights to a possible characterization for him. The issue with it is that Sonic Battle released during the same month of Sonic Heroes, and as a result, it seems to completely ignore the plot of Sonic Heroes. The battle plot is more developed than Heroes, but Heroes' story is the version the mainline games would adopt, so sadly there's not much point in analysing Shadow and Sonic Battle for this video. This brings us to Shadow the Hedgehog, the game. I already have a video talking about the general aspects of the game, so I will try not to repeat myself too much here. We find Shadow standing alone as he looks over Westopolis, likely meaning that Team Dark did split up soon after the conclusion of Sonic Heroes. Whether he always remembered, or had only recently recalled them, some memories of his past have returned to torment Shadow, specifically the death of his friend Maria. He did not find the answers he was looking for during the events of Sonic Heroes, and in the time since then, he's been wandering around as his desire for answers festers. Not knowing who he is and with no clear goal in mind, Shadow's foundation for his unwavering resolve is thoroughly cracked, leaving him vulnerable and confused. As if planned from the start, Black Doom strikes up a conversation with Shadow whilst his forces invade Westopolis. Although Shadow has no idea who he is, Doom speaks to Shadow with familiarity, mentioning a promised time and setting Shadow a goal before abruptly departing. Without any other leads, Black Doom is the only character who seems like they will actually disclose Shadow's past to him. Considering no one else felt like it was a good idea to fill Shadow in, thanks Rouge, from Shadow's perspective, he may as well investigate this possibility deeper. In addition, the phrasing around a promise may resonate with Shadow. As we have seen, he goes to great lengths to live up to his word. A key theme of Shadow the Hedgehog the game is discovering who he is.
This is who I am!
Which I've been saying is core to his very character. Shadow constantly seeks answers, and depending on the player will do questionable things in order to get them. Many of the choices Shadow can make involve siding himself with a particular group. Shadow clearly is seeking not just his memories, but a sense of self and a goal to head towards. For example, by the end of the neutral path he is allied to Omega, and believes completely that he is an android. Once Eggman is killed, he plans his next move, which would be to assume command of the androids and rule a new empire. This game has many examples like this, showing off that unwavering resolve I mentioned when Shadow knows who he is, has a goal, and believes in what he must do to achieve it. The same unwavering resolve he had when he sacrificed himself in SA2, just manifested in a different way.
Goodbye, Doctor!
I won't spend more time on the what-if scenarios though, as although they are interesting, much like Sonic Battle, their relevance to the canon of Shadow is questionable at best. The final story, however, is a lot more reliable, so let's see what Shadow gets up to there. Black Doom seems to be on the verge of victory as the team is paralysed before him. Shadow is informed on how Black Doom played a part in his creation, but then he remembers Maria, and with it the strength to refuse Black Doom's manipulation. Shadow sets out to defeat Devil Doom. He does so knowing who he is, knowing what his goal is, and believing in himself every step of the way. This is Shadow at the peak of unwavering resolve, and seemingly in agreement with me is the game, as you can hear a riff from Live and Learn during his transformation scene. The ending for Shadow is a potent character moment, as he gazes down upon the Earth from the Ark one last time, before discarding the photo of Gerald and Maria to symbolise moving forward from the past. Up until this point, Shadow has never been able to perform at his best consistently. He has been manipulated, confused with unclear memories, but this game ends with Shadow finally able to choose for himself what he wants to do. The question is, will he live up to his words, or would the past come back to haunt him again? Sonic 06 is the next relevant stop on Shadow's journey. As people who grew up with the adventure era are getting older now, there has been a rise in people expressing a love for this game that simply did not exist even 3 years ago. one of the game's aspects that receives the most praise is the way Shadow is treated, to which I agree. Let's get into the details. Shadow makes an impressive entrance as he assaults one of the good doctor's bases, revealing to the player in the process that he is now working under the service of GUN. It would appear that Shadow was sincere when he claimed to move on from his past. He is also clearly a lot more mellow in how he expresses himself now. During his mission, he doesn't banter back with Rouge, taking a strict and focused approach to his goal at hand. Sonic 06 shows us how Shadow has come to terms with his existence. He has a purpose and a goal throughout the entire adventure and seeks to achieve it, but he also helps people along the way. When asked for help by the people of Soliana, he doesn't call them pathetic and walk away, nor does he talk down to them. He simply helps them out. It is quite likely that the reason Shadow even cooperated with Gun in the first place is because through them he would be in a better position to help the people of the world and live up to his promise. Shadow doesn't live for himself, but to improve the lives of others. He is not a lone brooder though. Throughout the game's events we see just how affirmed Team Dark are as friends. At multiple times the story tests the strength of their friendship, but Team Dark always pulls through. The bonds of Team Dark is an aspect of Shadow in 06 that has already been getting a lot of attention as of late. However, I have not seen many pointing out his interactions with other members of the main cast. Take Sonic for example. Shadow does not harbour any hate towards him, nor do they have a strong rivalry between them. At this point, Shadow understands that while Sonic has different methods, they are fighting for the same things. Notice how at no point in this game do Shadow and Sonic get in one another's way. When Sonic is being trapped by Silver, Shadow jumps in to save him. He didn't need to know the context, and he didn't need a sarcastic remark. On the contrary, they don't even exchange words. A simple nod conveyed the understanding between them. This is quite different to their interactions in all games prior. With newcomer Silver, whilst it can be funny to play up Shadow's disliking of him,
Chaos control!
he actually treats Silver with a large amount of kindness, for a stranger. Silver is outwardly very naive and clearly confused. As he mentions Methylis, Shadow realises that Silver is not fully aware of his own situation. Shadow just spent the last few games being manipulated and confused. Even when people held the answers, they did not give them to him. So Shadow, likely recognising his own struggle in Silver, offers to reveal the missing puzzle pieces. This is something no one outwardly did for Shadow, so even if it wasn't intentional, it was a nice touch to see him doing it for Silver. Methylis the Dark shares some of the most screen time with Shadow. His motive is to manipulate Shadow and tear down everything he stands for, the perfect mirror to his unwavering resolve. Throughout the game, Methylis' attempts to test Shadow's resolve through continuously trying to shatter his faith in his friends and the world around him, but Shadow doesn't give in. If we look back on Shadow's character progression so far, it shows a surprisingly nice arc for a character who was supposed to die in his debut game. In Sonic Adventure 2, Shadow was arrogant. He felt like he was
I'm the coolest.
and that he was on top of the situation. In Sonic Heroes, Shadow was cocky, a less extreme version of his past self. In Shadow the Hedgehog, he is confused, only finding himself at the very end. And then, in Sonic 06, Shadow is confident. He doesn't need bravado, he no longer taunts, he acts. There have been criticisms of this portrayal of Shadow in the past, claiming that Shadow has been permanently tainted by the edginess of his game, and that Shadow should be behaving as he did in the end of Sonic Adventure 2. I am not going to pretend that Shadow the Hedgehog, the game, did not affect public perception of Shadow's character, but I also think there is a slight misunderstanding of where his character arc was heading. Shadow recovered from amnesia, but you can never truly recover from something like that completely. It is quite likely not every single memory he once had has returned. Furthermore, many of his memories exist now as retellings. He knows parts of his history through second and third hand accounts. Some things like his memories of Maria and the Ark are likely completely restored, as Black Doom allowed Shadow to relive them, but experiences are greatly affected by how they are perceived. The meaning and lessons Shadow gained from his life events may differ now that he's relearned some of them through different means. Not to mention, before his memories came back, he was making new memories that did not vanish. What I'm trying to say is that even though Shadow remembers the past by 06, it doesn't mean he's going to be the exact same person that he was before. Unfortunately, this is where Shadow's tale takes a turn for the worst. He didn't even make another mainline appearance until Sonic Generations, which released 5 years later, in which Shadow doesn't attend Sonic's birthday party during the intro, has a wordless fight with him, although he does talk before the fight, in which he seems to have regained his long-lost arrogance, and then keeps to himself during the victory celebration. Considering how important he was in the previous appearances, this was quite strange. Furthermore, his attitude shift comes out of nowhere. Even if the events of Sonic 06 no longer happened, Shadow would still have adopted that personality, as that was where he was headed. But now he has some sort of unexplained grudge with Sonic. The truth of the matter is that from this point on, public opinion as well as his portrayal in media would work to ignore all of the character's progressions Shadow has undergone and leave him as a two-dimensional recolor rival for Sonic, even though there is so much more to him than that. I usually don't bring up the voices for characters in these videos, but I must make an exception as it relates to his media presence. The voice direction for Shadow in this recent era has been dreadful. It is a clearly conscious choice to have Shadow sound like an arrogant, whiny emo kid who needs to find better solutions to his problems.
End to this with the next round. He can get plenty of rest after that.
I'll put an end to you. Now let's be done with this.
The voice direction seems as if they said, do a Shadow voice as if it were a parody about how bad Sonic 06 was, except make it the actual voice. Backtracking a little to Sonic Freeriders, Shadow is completely different to any of his original interpretations. He is not misled and righteous like in SA2, nor is he emotionally charged like in Shadow. He certainly is not mature like in 06. The closest he gets is to Shadow from Heroes, except he is more petty, prideful, and can't even respect his teammates. To aid this, much of Shadow's character assassination was spread by people on websites much like the one you are using right now, causing people not to look into anything for themselves and just assume Shadow is Edgy the Hedgy. Not that Sega was doing any favours for themselves with his portrayal in Sonic Boom. Whilst this incarnation technically is not Shadow, it was all we got for a few years. He's juvenile, hating Sonic because he's bringing change to all of Hedgehog kind, apparently. Boom Shadow has no nuance. He was just opposed to Sonic and the idea of friends, and any other generic trope for edgelord you can think of. Why it was thought Edgy Shadow was a more interesting direction is beyond me. Shadow was heavily shown off as a part of Sonic Force's marketing campaign.
No one is coming to help you. You might as well come out and join the others. I promise I won't hurt you.
He seems to have allied himself with Sonic's enemies for no particular reason. Now to find out what's going on with Shadow, that sort of thing. Unfortunately for Shadow, he had to rely on Sonic Forces to live up to its promises, and unlike himself, Forces is known for being disappointing. All Shadow does in the main game is go missing so that his allies struggle to defend the world without him, and then appear to one-shot a copy of Equal Strength, and then occasionally pose for the camera. This is not the full story though, as Forces also had free DLC titled Episode Shadow. The idea behind it was that we would get to see what Shadow was up to before the events of the game. For the first time since 2006, Shadow was finally playable in a main Sonic game. He got his own story, stages, and even remixes of some iconic Shadow music. It was nice to have a character that wasn't Sonic or somebody's persona to play as for once. Gameplay wise, he is identical to Sonic. although some enemies were scripted to give off the illusion of performing the light speed attack from Adventure. In this DLC, Shadow is toned down considerably from his other recent appearances, feeling closer to his Sonic 06 incarnation, but not as good. It is still Forces after all. Shadow feels rather underutilized in Sonic Forces, much like in Generations, but it is especially egregious here, as if anyone could have taken the place of Sonic whilst he was missing, it would have been Shadow. In order to make the Eggman takeover happen, Sonic's friends all became useless, Gun was Control-Alt-deleted from existence, and Shadow simply didn't let anyone know he was alive for about 6 months as he gazed at the moon or something. Shadow excels when he plays a meaningful role in the story, and/or is playable with interesting mechanics. With all that said, you would think I'm more positive about the future of Shadow, but no. Team Sonic Racing is still the most recent game at this point. Shadow's lines are terrible, he's completely hostile to everyone, even those who were once his friends. This theme continues into the well-animated shorts that promoted the game, with Shadow even disregarding Team Dark. I actually found the visual gag where Shadow bullies the Chow funny, but it's not something Shadow would actually do. Shadow's character works well when he knows who he is and believes in what he's doing, and when he is not that, then it can be about exploring what events can take place around his vulnerability. Similarly, when he is used without purpose or pure goal in mind by writers, Shadow feels out of place and flat. I must also mention a scene in the Sonic Forces follow-up comics. There is an entire scene revolving around evacuating a city from a robotic zombie virus. The whole time, Shadow is bickering with Sonic. Shadow ends up running into the zombie horde and gets infected. Sonic explains that by moving fast he can stave it off. Shadow says he doesn't run, and then gets himself converted like a fool, clearly not understanding Sonic's crystal clear message. Whilst he turns, he brings up how, as the ultimate life form, he shouldn't get sick. Now this would be a negative for me, except he's right. The fact that the virus infects Shadow shows how powerful it is, but it is portrayed more as if Shadow was delusional about being the ultimate life form and can't accept reality. He is the ultimate life form, but again, that's not the way it's used, so it is overall wasted potential there. Even Rouge doesn't react strongly as she watches Shadow basically kill himself, coming off more annoyed than saddened. It just feels like they're taking Shadow's character to absurd conclusions. Earlier in the comic, Shadow and Sonic have a disagreement over letting an Eggman with amnesia live, and it is interesting because Shadow has valid points, but even then, he was portrayed as a force of nature and wouldn't stand down to talk. Shadow is much more mature than that. This vision Sega appears to have for Shadow is edgier than his appearances in his own game. How can I have such an opinion, you may ask? Well, Shadow may not be shooting guns and saying damn these days, but he spits into the concept of friendship, likes to be alone, gets aggressive incredibly easily, rushes into things head first because he's the ultimate life form so he could never lose, etc. This knockoff version of Shadow represents nothing he used to stand for, and is instead an annoying replica, with all the traits that people wrongly associated with Shadow from back in the Adventure era. The fact that Sega have allowed the image of a key character to be distorted into an edgy joke by not changing the way he is portrayed, in fact they even cater to it, completely insults his character. If Sega doesn't know what to do with Shadow, they should stop using him, rather than removing his depth and leaving him as a shell of who he once was. Save him for whenever Sonic games return to having more playstyles, more complex gameplay, and deeper stories. Shadow used to be a character everyone could find something they like about. If you just wanted that surface level edgy the hedgy, then he certainly looks the part, and at times acted like it too, but there was much more to him than that. He had history, he struggled, he worked with many different people, some not on the side of Sonic. He had a large character arc and ended up being an equal to Sonic. You could play Shadow in an adventure, and as long as you gave him something to do, it would work, and it could be interesting. Now, everything that made Shadow himself has been lost, as if his own creators got amnesia when the Flame of Solaris went out back in 2006. This can still be changed. All Sega needs to do is look back at what worked and learn from it. That was where Sonic went wrong with Shadow the Hedgehog. They completely misinterpreted the character and overlooked his unwavering resolve and commitment to his promise.
You must realize now that you cannot hope to stop me with your limited power.
So you say?
It's futile. The world will betray you. Why fight at all? Why risk your life for those who will persecute you later?
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.